Very nice.
Oh,
All right, phone's turned off.
It's like the family tartan.
No, I know.
I don't think Queen houses are doing targets.
There's a lot to read here.
Frankly, if I don't get any interest,
You know, I tried to. I mean, I got through a lot of it.
Yeah, I was going to say,
The other
we caught on faster,
I'm on the
harder.
board of the Blue Shield Foundation, and we have a board meeting tomorrow
luckily,
afternoon.
I mean,
That too.
particularly they have my first fund is
Absolutely.
The last thing I want to say 2 or 3 years ago,
Times a year. Plus we have a little day like this.
tireless.
Well, oh dear. Okay.
it was just released this morning.
A whole lot to give.
It's a fun. I mean, we give away $35 million a year.
Table as opposed to those.
Was she the one who told you about it, or
Almost all goes to healthcare safety net.
Yeah. That's what we see. This is where we started.
The
Anything like that.
largest private fund in the
well, I'm sure she'll be excited.
about.
I wonder if they'll be able to like, they're gonna play that.
No, I know. I recognize it. Yeah. I can't even begin to tell you the number of issues.
From
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is so sweet.
Well, at least we know
It's like
he
candy.
isn't necessarily taking 545 and things of that sort.
Other children. Right. So the two at home really are irrelevant. No. So then my poor husband's political crisis.
No, she's pretty independent.
I didn't know that.
My brother and sister was. But he was also
Yeah, I saw them.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Oh,
They're taking
no.
hits to a certain extent because of hiring online.
No, this is
Yeah.
academic.
Where did you pick this up?
Scientific American.
Out of office replies later.
Gotta keep it.
It's all practically online.
I'll mention it maybe later on today.
Just about. You don't understand.
I understand.
We're not football.
But, you gotta understand.
When it's amazing, amazing blue, right?
Exactly.
It
was a good idea
does
when we
work great.
Bad idea when they did away
It's a
with it.
religion.
Especially since it doesn't generate that much money. I mean, you add out all the Cal grants and all.
That was incredible.
Buffy Williams and all this
Yeah.
shuffle. Yeah.
Grant Stanford was going to win that game. They were marching down, at the end of the game.
Program that's been developed in a lot of community colleges.
Well, thank God they got that fumble.
Largely for African American students, and particularly trying to be South African American males for success.
Signal from someone.
There's like Puente that was aimed at Latina students, and this one came about Puente.
Give them a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they've even done one in my district for Asian American students. This one. Statewide effort and conferences now.
Oh my God.
This is the hospital we have alerts of 8 kids.
That's what statistics tell us. Yep.
Yeah.
I was just commenting. It's pretty cool in here.
Our lives now run by our phone.
This is funded and things.
It just says seeks to secure.
Faith in the future.
It does. You're saying, like, after all, they kind of lived through in Ferguson as well.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Before I turn the meeting over to the Chancellor, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. One, I did drop off an article that I happened to read yesterday in Scientific American, the board of directors there, focusing in on two-year colleges and the work that two-year colleges do for the economy, for the country. And they have an example of a couple of states that are moving towards no fees for community college participation for their students. because of our importance to the country. And I just thought I'd drop it off there because today we're going to be doing a lot of work on a range of subjects, and each one of these is very intertwined. The work that we're doing is much different than it's been in the past, although we have always worked hard at training, educating our students in the state. But this time we also have what seems to be, over the last number of years, increasing support for the work that we do. So it adds a greater importance and significance to what it is that we do. And the only other thing I'd like to say is, as we read through the materials here, this is work done by not a very large Chancellor's Office staff. And I have to commend the Chancellor, Bryce Harris, and the Vice Chancellors and the staff here in Sacramento for the work that they have to do for the benefit of the system. Of course, a very large system. And we've added one new college this fall, Clovis Community College. And so we welcome them. Now that's 113 community colleges, so it's a very big system, as we all know. And the Chancellor and his staff have done a really marvelous job of putting this material together, and not just putting the material together, but doing the work that this reflects, which is, of course, far more important than just putting a nice presentation together. So, Chancellor Harris, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Baca, members of the board. Let me first and foremost thank the members of the board. This morning is above and beyond the call for the board. Normally we start at noon on Mondays, and so many of the board came in last evening for this day-long retreat, and we genuinely appreciate your time. We are looking forward to today. We do have a very ambitious agenda, and as Dr. Baca suggested, that's because there's an ambitious amount of work being undertaken by the system. So we will try to stick pretty closely to this schedule. We may get ahead and behind as the day wears on a little bit, but I think to begin with, I want to pass out a chart that the board has seen previously. As Dr. Baca said, managing a myriad of projects of a huge system is a challenge. And in order to do that, we do try to pay attention to our workflow and what's being undertaken. So what I want to do is talk you through this briefly as an introduction to giving you an update on the strategic plan. And if you look at the chart above the calendar dates, 2011 through 2019, you'll see the two most significant issues that we have been undertaking for quite some time, and that is based on, in the upper left-hand corner, the work of the Student Success Task Force, which you'll hear more about later this morning. We are in the midst of the Student Success Initiative in the Chancellor's office. Now, you'll see that work, we believe, being completed at the end of the next calendar year. That doesn't mean that we give up on student success or stop focusing on that. It means that we believe by then we'll have had those 22 recommendations undertaken. The second large bar at the top is the restoration of access. Those are the two initiatives, student success and access, that we have been, on which we've been focused. And we think it's going to take a few more years, and we're hopeful that funds from Prop 30 will continue to help this, and that the economy will recover sufficiently to allow us to continue the restoration of access. We believe this system, by 2025, probably ought to have 3 million students in it. That seems like a long way to go, but we believe you'll see an incremental growth in enrollment, barring some kind of financial downturn that's significant in the next few years. And then when we get into the strategic plan and later into today's agenda, you will see that the one part of the strategic plan that we have yet to actualize is workforce and economic development activity. And so today you're going to see a good amount of discussion on that topic. And you'll recall that Vaughn and her team have been undertaking the Doing What Matters for Jobs in the Economy initiative for the past few years, we believe preparing us for a conversation on this subject and perhaps, according to the board's wishes, another initiative. Then when you drop down below the line, you'll see that the strategic plan of the system, which I'll talk about in a moment, we think is going to last through the next calendar year, and then we think in early 2016 it'll be time to do another full-blown strategic planning session for the system. You're going to hear, as the day wears on, conversation about 1440 transfer degrees, about accreditation, about our Veterans Initiative, about the Community College Baccalaureate, Adult Ed, and a number of other activities that fall under the Student Success Initiative at the top of this page. So this gives you a feeling for the workflow, and as Dr. Baca said, keep in mind this agency has 150 people that it's utilizing to try to manage this workflow, and the vice chancellors around this table periodically come to work with bags under their eyes, and that's because they've earned those legitimately trying to keep this agenda going. So I can't say enough, and I think as the day wears on and you hear from these folks individually, you're going to get an idea of the quality of the leadership of this organization, and it's really a pleasure to work with these people. So let me turn your attention behind the first tab, the strategic plan. I'm not going to go into great detail. You're going to hear a lot about the specifics of the strategic plan throughout the day as we highlight the various issues. I do, however, want to remind the board that this strategic plan was originally done in 2006, and it was a system-wide effort that involved an awful lot of people, not only around this table, but some of the folks that are spectators in the audience here today, and folks up and down the state, representing the myriad of constituent groups that spent the better part of 6 months doing a really robust strategic plan, augmented and supported by the Morai, Safano, and Goltzman group out of Berkeley. The MIG firm supported that activity. And so when we took a look at that in late 2012, after the board had approved the Student Success Initiative recommendations, it became pretty clear to us that the system didn't need a complete new overhaul of the strategic plan. It did need some refinements and some clarifications, and so you'll recall that in early 2013, coming out of that March board retreat, we did refresh the strategic plan, and you have that one, that refreshed version in front of you. Now let me call your attention to the next page, which you'll see those strategic goals. There are 5 of them. And access and student success, as you saw earlier, are the 2 that we've really been most robustly involved in. The third one is the one that, although we've been involved in it, we really have not completed that portion of the strategic plan, and you're going to hear a lot more about that as the day wears on. And then in order to do those 3 things listed in A, B, and C, the 4th area was an effective system. You can't accomplish the kind of work that needs to be done unless you have an effective system. And then finally, having the financial fuel to make those things achievable. So when you flip over then to page 3, you'll see the entire list of the strategies that were in that strategic plan and the ones that were revised accordingly. And again, they're broken down into those 5 areas. And really, if you look at Area A, we have work underway or completed in all 5 of those strategies. Under Area B, we have work underway or accomplished all 8 of those, with the exception of B7, which, again, we're going to talk about today. Area C is the area where we'll spend a lot of our time today. This is the one that we need more work to be done. Area D, we have work underway in all of those. However, we still have a lot of energy to expend on D4, system office roles and functions. We'll talk more about that later today. And the last 2, accreditation and strategic collaboration. Then under E, we have a couple of those underway, E1 and 2. We still have a lot of work to do on E1 and 3. We still have a lot of work to do on E2, resource diversification, and the last 2, resource optimization and fee policy review. So that gives you an idea. If you look down this list of all these strategies, really with the exception of Area C, we've accomplished a great deal of this or have work well underway. Strategic plans are only as good as whether they're actualized or not. And a lot of organizations, a lot of systems create strategic plans and then, as all of us have a tendency to do, get involved in the day-to-day activities of life and never get back to actually doing those things. I want to assure you that we take this seriously. We talk about it a lot, and I think as the day goes on today, you'll see the quantum amount of work based on the strategic plan that's been undertaken in the system. So now just flip forward, if you would, to page 18, 17, and 18. On page 17, we talk about outreach to students.
And before
Yes.
we go, too, I just wanted to know, and especially for the new board members, too, I just remember very clearly sitting in this room just over a year ago in July of 2013, and the tremendous work that went into the development of this strategic plan, and then the contributions from the board to that strategic plan. I remember clearly how Member Belinsky was able to contribute and help fine-tune. And one of the things in rereading this, I know we're going to focus on some specific areas, reminded me of what a great plan this was and how effective that this has been in providing a playbook for the future for the system. And it's crafted so well that it makes it clear not only to the stakeholders within the system, but everybody across the state about how we're focusing our efforts at the statewide. And so I just wanted to restate my enthusiasm for just having this opportunity to reread it, and now you working with us on how we're going to drill down and make sure it all becomes a reality, because I feel there's oftentimes in the past where you create these plans and then they just collect dust. This is not one. This is a living document.
Absolutely is. So if you look over on page 17, we talk a little bit about outreach to students and parents. This is an issue which is still a tremendous problem. We still have an awful lot of young people in this state who don't believe higher education is available to them. They don't think it's in their future. I think it's interesting that Dr. Baca brought forward this article and talks about states that are beginning to look at free tuition. It is somewhat ironic that that was the birth of California's community colleges, and we actually went away from that. And the irony is, if you look at the revenue generated from fees in this state, which, by the way, doesn't come back to the system, it goes to the state, and you take out the Board of Governor fee waivers, Cal grants, all those things, it's not a significant amount of money anyway. And so it is somewhat unfortunate that those fees still continue to be a barrier for a lot of young people. One encouraging thing is that UC-CSU and the community colleges are going to ramp up our outreach and push that now down into the 7th grade. We plan to begin that this October, and I think you're going to see a much more robust initiative in that regard in the future. If you turn over then to page 19 on the next page, you'll notice the tremendous amount of increase we've had in financial aid in this state. If you go back just about a decade, we had probably about 30 to 35% of the students in this state accessing financial aid in one way or another, and now that number is well in excess of 60% if you take in all the different kinds of financial aid. So it's been a tremendous success story. Awful lot of students that are accessing higher education that wouldn't have been able to do so otherwise. Over on page 21, you're going to hear later today about the Veterans Initiative. This is one of our real success stories. I think we still have a tremendous amount of work to do in this regard, but if you look at the dramatic uptick in the number of our colleges that have veterans centers, and Linda will go into more detail on that later today, it really is a tremendous success. Flipping over then to page 23, I would remind the board that we've had funding for equity that's come to us in the last year, and those student equity plans, which unfortunately had to be put on the shelf during the financial downturn, are now being reactivated, and colleges will be polishing those up and completing them. And Linda, help me remember when they're due.
By the end of the year.
By the end of the calendar year. So that's really a tremendous positive. That was an area that I think all of us felt terribly that had to sort of get put on hold. during the financial crisis, and getting $70 million in the budget this year to augment this work is really encouraging. Now turning over to page 29, you're going to hear a little bit more later today, quite a bit more on our Student Success Initiative. And so you see there under 3.4, 5.1, 5.2, and 8.3, all of this student support area is really dependent on the Student Success Initiative. If you flip over to the next page, on page 31, Patrick will be bringing you up to date on all of these activities, the work on common assessment, on centralized and integrated technology, and on diagnostic assessment, so you'll hear more about that later today. Over on page 32, you will recall that the board sponsored legislation this year on concurrent enrollment. We lost that legislation in the final hours of the session. I think the encouraging thing is most of us believe we didn't lose it because it was a bad piece of legislation or there were people who were opposed to the idea or even the structure of the bill. It probably got lost because of politics, and occasionally that's what happens to bills. So we do intend to run that flag up the pole again in the next session, and we are optimistic that we don't have as much headwind this time, and we're hopeful we'll get it through. When you go over to page 34, I will tell you that one of the great concerns I think all of us have is the capacity of public higher education in California to handle the student load that's coming at us. It's interesting to me that back in 07, 08, we were all talking about something called Tidal Wave 2. We all remember that. That was the echo of the baby boom that was going to wash over our colleges, and then the economy went in the tank in 08, 09, and people just quit talking about it. That doesn't mean the students weren't here. As you know, we lost in excess of 500,000, and if you look at the ones that should have come to us, we probably lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 600,000 to 700,000. And when you look at the UC and the CSU, although they've had some modest improvements, they too struggle to accommodate the students who want to go directly into those institutions and our transfers. And when you add in, and you'll hear more about 1440 a little bit later today, the transfer agreement with the CSU, it becomes really worrisome that not only will community colleges not have enough seats, but the CSU and the UC will not either. And so President Napolitano and Tim White and I are trying to whenever possible, present a unified message on that front. We don't believe, any of us, that it is a zero-sum game. We think that added seats at all three of our systems benefit all three of our systems. So you'll hear a lot more about that and the potential to impact access later today. Then over on the next page, on 35, Pam will talk later today about 1440 and that tremendously successful program. Over on the next page, on 36, I think that one of the challenges we all have here in terms of supporting all of these cultural changes that we're making in our system is professional development of our employees. You will recall the state used to fund staff and professional development for faculty only a number of years ago. I don't remember, Dan or Eric, do you, what the total amount of money? About $8 million statewide. And then during the budget crisis, they lost that. Some of the districts tried to continue those programs out of their operating budget, but several of the districts had to cut it out altogether. And, of course, it was never expanded to include classified staff and managers as it needed to be. We've gone back to the legislature a couple of times asking for money to fund this. To be honest with you, we're working with a governor who doesn't believe in categorical funding, and so I think the chances of us getting line item funding for this in the budget are slim. I think what is more likely is that we can continue to get, hopefully in time, some increased COLA funding for our colleges, and we can begin to talk about faculty and staff development is a priority for the system, and hopefully we'll see colleges begin to invest their regular operating budgets, if they're restored the way they need to be, in this area. That doesn't mean we won't keep asking for money for professional and development. I'm not optimistic, however, that we're going to see that. When you flip over to the next page, you're going to hear a lot more today, as I've mentioned to you, about our workforce and economic development activity. I would say down on the bottom of page 39, you'll recall the board took action to change repeatability statutes, policies a year or so ago. With the funding coming back and access being built up again, I will tell you that I've had some concerns expressed by some of our CEOs that they don't like those repeatability changes as much as they thought they were going to. They're getting, as we all expected they would, pressure from their communities, especially a lot of the colleges that have residents that are up in years and want to go back to their community college to take the kind of avocational courses that we used to be able to afford. So you're likely to hear more and more about this repeatability issue. At this point, we certainly believe the changes that the board made are the right ones, and I've tried to communicate to the CEOs up and down the state that I am very, very worried that the administration and the Department of Finance have made it crystal clear to us that they want the increased access dollars going to CTE, remedial education, and transfer education, and that if we start adding avocational courses back as a way of capturing access dollars, we're likely to get in a great deal of trouble doing that. So that's a subject that's likely to be back on the radar screen in the future. If you'll turn over to page 53, there is a student success recommendation that has to do with a longitudinal student record system. I am absolutely confident we're going to get all 22 of our recommendations done. However, what done means on this one may depend to some extent on what the UC and the CSU ultimately will work on with us on. Patrick and his team have been trying to convince those two systems that we need a better way to share data, and there seems to be some receptivity to that, but it's very, very difficult. And so you'll hear more about that as the day wears on, but at this point, I would say this is the one recommendation that will be harder for us to ultimately put a complete yes check on. If you go over to page 58, where they talk about, we talk about, again, professional development, and there just are no state funds for that, and an inconsistent level of support. And then over on page 66, this one has to do with state funding for post-secondary education, including restoring the statutory share of Prop 98. And I will tell you that we had little money in 08 through 12, and you made tremendous plans. And now in 12 through what we hope will be 15, we hope to be able to deliver on that and fund at the colleges the implementation of all the student success initiatives that are being undertaken. So that is a really quick highlight of the strategic plan sections that some of which you'll hear more about today, and then a few items that I highlighted that we think are continuing to be problematic. Before I turn that over to Patrick and Eric to get into more detail on student success, are there any questions from the board?
Is it possible to ask about, very quickly, certain, I don't know if this is on, certain initiatives as to whether more is going to be said about them?
Absolutely.
For instance, on page 22, when we do get to online education, would there be any comment or discussion about state authentication? I ask because Dean Woodyard really did a recent webinar about it, and he even made the comment that there might need to be some kind of legislation with regard to this state authentication. So I'd like to raise that as to whether something would be said at a later point. On page 35, will we hear when we're talking about 1440 more about these two initiatives that I hadn't heard about, but be very supportive of, where it talks about this pathway that's work underway with the Association of Independent California Community Colleges and Universities to build something similar to ADT degrees so that we have a better understanding of what that means, which colleges, universities might be in that process, as well as the fact that it's talking about building different relationships with the UC system in terms of even lower division major preparation requirements and trying to get those more aligned throughout the UC system. I think it'd be interesting to hear what's going on there.
Okay.
And on page 57, and I'm not sure where this would fit in today, but at a later date maybe, it says that the CID Common Course Numbering System is being expanded, and it'd be nice to hear what that means in terms of the expansion. Is it just then between CSUs and the community colleges? I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And on page 67, which is the last one I'll bring up, is it 67? Yes, on 67 it talks about community service courses, and I'm curious at the community service handbook and the way you come about determining how to charge for those courses has ever been updated, and whether that should be an effort that we look at, because I do think with the repeatability issue that if the colleges could get a more effective way of doing community service, some of the people that have been coming back and repeating courses probably could pay for and would pay for just to take the course. And whether we could even look at some point in time if in some instances that a community service person and an apportionment student could be in the same room. I'll leave it there.
Great.
Thank you, Member Belinsky. Vice President Baum?
The one item I would add to it, just to see, and I don't know that it's on the agenda, is the leadership development issue. You and I have had some private conversations about, there's some regulatory handicaps as well as just a pipeline handicap in building the next generation of strong, prepared leaders for our system at the dean, college, and district level, too, because I think that is something that I'm very concerned about for the future.
Okay, we'll provide some update on
You know, those of us who worked on the strategic plan nearly 10 years ago often had some combative situations there during the year, and in fact one of them was on the strategies to use for developing leadership in the system. And you know, it's an important area that I think we still need to very much address. The strategic plan was very good work. It went through a year, similar to Student Success Task Force. It was a very representative group of folks that worked on that. And when the Chancellor began working on updating it, I was very pleased that that was happening, because we shouldn't have good work just laying dormant. We should build on it, not simply reinvent. And you know, most organizations, it's just the California community colleges, but most organizations tend to want to reinvent the wheel, and we shouldn't be doing that all the time. We should build on good work and be able to do the things that Member Belinsky and Vice President Baum suggest that we do to do that. And of course, the work that, and as I read through this after we received it, you know, I could see that it isn't just a response in terms of the verbiage and the way it's presented, but it is substantive, and it is a marriage with the work that was done by the Student Success, that good work that was done, and then, you know, as the Chancellor is mentioning, we've got some work to do with workforce development, and I trust very much that that will be embedded in some of that strategic approach that we laid out and are dedicated to. Member Belinsky?
As you bring up the leadership thing, it reminded me, and I'm wondering if that will funnel into that issue, the UC Davis Center and the program that's being developed there, if that will somehow be able to be used to address the leadership issue.
That's what it's designed for. We'll give you some update on that as well.
Okay.
Chancellor?
Good, thank you. All right, we're going to move right into the next item, and this one is the two big focuses of the system over the last several years, student success and access. Eric will give you an update on the student success portion of this, and then Patrick is going to come in behind and talk a little bit about access. Eric?
All right. Good morning, everybody. This next portion where we're talking about about student success and access, you'll see is very much connected with the strategic plan presentation that the Chancellor just gave. You'll notice the common themes and many of the specific initiatives we'll have a chance to drill down a little more deeply into right now. So I'm going to begin by kind of laying out the Student Success Initiative and kind of how we've gotten to where we're at, and an assessment of where we're kind of where we're going to be going over the next couple of years here. The Student Success Initiative was an initiative to develop an actionable agenda, an actionable plan, securely nested in that strategic plan of the system, but an actionable plan that the system could use in reacting to the budget crisis that occurred in 2008, and really the fallout of that hit our system in 2009-10. And what we saw there was a confluence of events, deep budget cuts to the colleges that severely constrained our capacity to serve students. Our system funding was cut a total of about 12%. In addition, cost of living adjustments were foregone, totaling about 18% in spending power. So the system suffered a tremendous loss in the resources we had available to serve students. That led to our enrollments being cut from about 2.7 million students down to about 2.1 million students. It's hard to fathom the impacts of that on California. So it was in that climate that it created an urgency for our system to react to that and come up with an actionable plan for how we were going to respond. And I think it's really to the credit of the system that the system embraced a strategy and a mindset of rather than focusing on the cuts and being overwhelmed by that, instead focusing on the resources we had left, engaging in a conversation around priorities and figuring out how we were going to use our remaining resources most wisely to best serve our students. And so it was really this confluence of the budget cuts, this long-standing commitment of our system to serve our students and help them achieve the opportunities that we want them to achieve, that they want to achieve. And also the third element was a growing national and state level awareness of the need for us to train more college-educated workers. And when I say college-educated, I'm talking about certificates in workforce training. I'm talking about associate degrees, and obviously there's a need also in the bachelor's realm. But this growing awareness of the pressing workforce challenges that our state and our nation faced was also one of the factors that forced us to focus more on completion. So those three events came together, and it really created an opportunity for our system to rise up. And it was it was in 2011 when our Board of Governors pulled together a Student Success Task Force. That task force's charge was to develop an actionable plan for improving student success, student completion rates in our system. It was under the leadership of Chancellor Jack Scott. It was Peter McDougall from the board who chaired that task force. President Baca was on the task force, Chancellor Harris, and there were 22 members of that task force, also including David Morse, President of the Academic Senate, and was looking around to make sure I didn't miss anybody else who served. But it was a year-long process in which those individuals met on roughly a monthly basis to review, analyze, discuss, debate different strategies for improving completion rates in our colleges. They heard from state experts, from national experts. The task force was composed of students, faculty, classified staff, trustees, presidents. There was really external stakeholders from the business community, from the research community. So it was a wide, kind of a very, very diverse group. And over the course of that 12 months, they delved into really nearly every aspect of how the community colleges operate. And after that that deliberation, they emerged with a 21 recommendation plan, and those 21 recommendations went to the Board of Governors in January 2012. The Board of Governors unanimously endorsed and adopted those 21 recommendations, and with that, it launched the implementation phase of this process. The recommendations really were widespread today. I'm going to drill down a little more deeply into about 6 of them, but the recommendations ranged from a recommendation that we build out stronger linkages between the community college system and the K-12 system, so as to more effectively prepare students for success in college. So this has to do with aligning curriculum, aligning academic expectations, so that when students arrive at the community colleges, they're ready for college level work. The recommendations talked about improving and aligning California's approach to adult education. They spoke about how we should fund the colleges. They spoke about they were heavily focused on student services and how we should steps we could take to better support our students when they arrive at our college, and to help them identify an educational goal, develop an education plan, and then provide students with the support to stay on that track as they move towards completion. So that's the kind of the landscape of the recommendations. The recommendations that came out were then, as we move towards implementation, the general approach was to convene a work group, again, with broad-based stakeholder involvement. We benefited tremendously from thousands of hours worth of time donated by experts from around the system, faculty, staff, students, administrators, and with a great deal of input from the field, we were able to develop the concrete plan to really take a recommendation that was kind of a broad concept and take that all the way down to an operational level, which some of these recommendations were adopted through regulation, some through policy, some through changes in law, some through the state budget. So that's the kind of the context, and I guess before I step into these 6 specific recommendations, I just wanted to perhaps state the obvious here, which is that there's such a tremendous connection between access and success. And I think that that's something that our system is probably clearer about now than maybe we've ever been, which is that providing students with access to a college without a clear shot at success is rather hollow. And if that access has to be meaningful. On the other hand, if we've got a tremendous system in which we have sky-high success rates, but we're serving a very narrow band of Californians, it's also a pretty hollow victory. So the combination, the sweet spot that we're moving towards here is creating access to success and trying to focus on not only increasing the rate of student completion, but also the numbers of students coming through. And that's going to help us achieve our objectives of not only empowering our students, but also providing with California with the citizenry and workforce that we need to compete going forward. So the 6 recommendations that I wanted to drill into a little bit more have to do with, this matrix that shows the 21 recommendations is a document that I know you've seen before, and we use it on a very regular basis in the Chancellor's office. At this point, we're completed 12 of the 21 recommendations, and in the next year we hope to be able to check off the rest of the boxes on this. So the 6 recommendations I wanted to focus on are 4 that have been completed, and then 2 that are in process. And so I'll start with the Student Success and Support Program, which is recommendation 8.2. And as I said, many of the recommendations really focus on the work we do in student services, the student support services that help with orientation, counseling, education planning, and guidance for our students. And on recommendation 8.2, the way which was to invest in the student support initiative, the way that took form was to reinvent and to expand an existing community college program that was called Matriculation. And that was our counseling program, basically. And so that was converted into the Student Success and Support Program, which increased the focus of those counseling efforts and the orientation and the assessment and placement activities. It increased the focus on and aligned it with our student success agenda. That change was accomplished through legislation carried by Senator Alan Lowenthal, Member Malumed's husband, and who was a great leader in this effort as well. And that legislation, SB 1456, made those changes to the and established the Student Success and Support Program. That was in September of 2012. And then following up on that in the 2013-14 budget and in the 2014-15 budget, Governor Brown invested heavily in the Student Success and Support Program, taking what was a $50 million program and increasing it to what's now a $200 million program. In addition, I'll just a little side note that in this last budget, the 14-15 budget, there was also a related effort that was funded around the student equity plans to provide $70 million for our colleges to help close achievement gaps for our at our colleges. So that's a mighty investment in this initiative, and really in many ways forms the cornerstone of the student success effort. The next item I was going to focus on was this. Yes.
Can I ask a question? Or he was going to...
Yeah. So Eric, thank you for the update on this. The question I have is, it seems like we're putting more dollars in, which is great. The question is, what's the impact? How do we measure impact, and do we have any sense of, we're investing more money, but what's the return on investment? Do we have any sense of that at all?
Yes, we're and one of the great things about this initiative is the Chancellor mentioned the 150 people in the Chancellor's office. We're all working on this, and in particular, the executive team as well. So I might look to Linda Michalowski, who's done a lot of the work on this program, to follow up. But I would say the focus is on results. It's not just on putting money in an account. It's about getting a change, getting change at the local level. The most significant substantive deliverable that I'd focus on is the new requirement to have an education plan in place for every student. And so whereas in the past it was seen more as an optional process, it's now seen as a required mandatory step that every student should develop that educational goal and have an education plan in place so that they have a clear pathway that's going to get them to success. And that outcome is one of the metrics in the student success scorecard, which I'll get to. So I think that's the clearest answer to your question, but I don't know if Linda has anything she'd want to add to that.
Well, I would just point out that the last year's augmentation of student success funds brought the system back to where we were for funding for these student support services in 2001. This year's doubled that. So while we have resources now in place, the results are not going to be instantaneous, but we've put a lot of effort into indicating exactly how we're going to measure whether we're being successful, and not only successful for students as a whole, but successful across the board for students who come to us underrepresented and with greater deficiencies for for achieving a successful goal. So, every year, it will be crystal clear whether these interventions are being effective or not in increasing student success.
I would just remind the board that you set goals, specific goals, at your July meeting for those as well.
The other question I have is the colleges are in process of writing student success and support program plans at the moment, and those I think are due in October or November. One question, which is not attempting to be critical, but just curious why, the equity plan has to be signed off by the Board of Trustees. It has to go through a vetting process, but the student success plan does not. And so as a result, I'm questioning how much vetting it's going to get locally at the colleges, and I coming from some experience. And will they get any kind of review to look if there are best practices already occurring that should be shared with the field, or?
I'll turn to Linda on that.
Absolutely. That's the next phase of the work that we have to do now that we have the regulations in place, we have the program plan, the guidelines in place. Our next focus will be on identifying what is really working and making sure that other colleges not only are aware of what those things are, but perhaps have tools and packages so that it can be more readily replicated at additional colleges. And I'm sure at some point someone plans to mention the Student Success Center for California, which is funded by the Kresge Foundation and involves the hiring of Paul Steenhausen, who's here in the audience, working on that grant at the foundation. And I think that will be a lot of the emphasis of what he'll be able to do is identify and disseminate those best practices.
And I'd like to see some vetting of the plan in the future, that internally at the colleges there's a way of making that happen.
Well, we did require sign-off throughout the institution, the CEO, the CBO, the Chief Student Services Officer, the Chief Instructional Officer, the Academic Senate President. So it will go through that form of vetting. I'm not sure, the requirement of the Student Equity Plan go to your Board of Trustees is long-standing in Title V.
Right. Just going back to Arnaldo's point, too, with the metric that you mentioned, the requirement for an educational plan, we'll be able to then count the number of people who have now completed their educational plan and compare that longitudinally over time to see, are we getting higher degrees of plan completion? And then after that, we always felt that if you have a plan, you're much more likely to achieve your stated objective, and we'll be able to say, are we then generating more certificates and more degrees as a result? And then you could see the return on that investment when you get the funding to make sure that everybody has access to a plan. And then does that translate 2 or 3 years down the road into more degrees and certificates in the system, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the powerful things about an initiative like this that's so focused on completion. These 21 recommendations go together, and at the end of the day, they should drive improvements in student success. And we built the metrics. Actually, that's my next item I was going to talk about. But we built the accountability tool to focus, like in a way that's with a higher degree of clarity than we've ever had as a system, and I'd argue with greater clarity than any system in the nation. And that will be the true measure of the success of this initiative.
And then we want to be able to say that investment of $100 million or whatever else actually yielded quite a defined return on that.
Yes. So there are with the 21 recommendations, we could talk about this all day. So I'm going to just try to march through it and be available for questions here. But the second item then is the Student Success Scorecard, recommendation 7.3. This scorecard was an update to our systems accountability tool, and the Student Success Scorecard went in to effect in spring of 2013. It was one of the earlier implementations, and the scorecard really we owe so much to Executive Vice Chancellor Perry, who led this effort, built out this accountability tool to focus in on completion, not only the kind of the high level completions of transfer, earning a certificate or a degree, but also the kind of the tipping point metrics, the intermediate metrics around persistence, and the intermediate metrics, intermediate steps that are shown that if students achieve a certain level of persistence, they're much more likely to achieve the ultimate completion. And so the scorecard focused on those metrics, and also with also highlighting achievement gaps across populations. And there's very much a commitment within the Student Success Initiative to lift all boats, and that we want to improve success rates as a system, while at the same time closing achievement gaps across groups, so that we can guarantee that we adhere to our system's long-standing commitment to equity and serving all populations. So the scorecard went in place in spring of 2013. Of course, there's the ancillary work that you all have been involved in lately around setting the goals based off those scorecard metrics. So that's all that set of recommendations is well down the road. The third item I was going to focus on is the establishment of system-wide enrollment priorities. This was done in September of 2012. The Board of Governors work in this area. Essentially, this was the recommendation was to build out incentives within the community college system to incentivize students to engage in the behaviors that are going to help them succeed. And those behaviors are to attend orientation, to go through an assessment process, to select a program of study, to develop an education plan with the help of the college personnel. And those steps were we wanted to build in incentives. And one way that to build an incentive is to say that a student that completes those steps has a higher priority to get the classes they want to take. And particularly in an environment of limited access, when many of our course sections were cut, that was and will continue to be a high level of an incentive whenever the course sections are scarce. In addition, the enrollment priorities also give a higher priority to students who are meeting a minimum threshold of academic progress. So that was the first time that academic progress was used as that kind of a determinant in enrollment prioritization. The next item, the fourth item I was going to touch on was recommendation 3.2, which was a similar recommendation to make modifications to our Board of Governors fee waiver program in order to create incentives for students to again engage in behaviors that are going to help them succeed. And so the changes to the Board of Governors fee waiver for the first time put in place a requirement, a minimum academic threshold that a student needs to achieve in order to be eligible for that fee waiver. To be clear, it doesn't turn it into a merit scholarship. The threshold we're talking about is a 2.0, and the student must stay above that 2.0 threshold. And essentially, the logic behind that is that if those Board of Governors fee waivers are valuable to students, it's an investment of state resources, and it sends a strong signal to students that if in order to be eligible for that award, you need to meet minimum academic thresholds, and in doing so, that it increases the amount of skin in the game that the student has in terms of their behavior, their studying on a day-to-day basis. So those four recommendations. That recommendation was adopted in January of 2014, and those four recommendations are really cornerstone items in the student success agenda. The two additional items I was going to briefly touch on were our two technology initiatives we have underway, and Patrick may want to weigh in later when he, if there are questions on this, but with the Student Success Task Force had a recommendation 2.1 to develop a common assessment for use across our colleges. The benefits of this would be, without going into too much detail on this, the history is that across our system there was a wide variety of assessments that were used in assessing students when they came in for placement purposes, and that led to a great number of inefficiencies, both economic and also just difficulties for students having to be reassessed multiple times. And the task force recommended developing one stronger assessment that we as a system could use our buying power as a large system to develop a common assessment, to have it built, and then make it available free to our colleges. And we could do so, achieve some economic efficiencies, but more importantly, develop a clearer and more effective set of assessments to guide or a more effective assessment tool to guide our students. Well, as that is developed, we're actually building out an even more robust idea, which is to not only have that common assessment tool, that diagnostic assessment that is in development now and will be made available to our colleges, but also building out a multiple measures approach to placement, which has been in more recent research has been shown to be more effective at getting students into the right courses, and that's looking at a number of measurements of a student's ability, including perhaps looking at high school transcripts, the diagnostic tool that I just mentioned before that we're building out as a system, but looking at multiple measures that can be used to place a student in the class that they're going to be most successful in. So the Common Assessment Initiative is underway now. There is a heavy technological piece in that as we're building this diagnostic assessment tool, and that's underway, and it'll be a big step forward. And then lastly, it's a very exciting initiative building, really harnessing technology to employ in that education planning process that I mentioned. The reality is that we, that this process of having students develop an educational objective and develop a plan to achieve that objective is really core to the work that our colleges do. Historically, the way that work is done is through counselors, face-to-face, and we've never had the numbers of counselors necessary to really do that work the way it should be done. And so the approach the task force recommended and what we're pursuing here is a combination of both getting additional funds, the Student Success and Support Program dollars. Those funds can be used to hire counselors and advisors. So we need more people, more counselors on campus, but we also need to leverage technology. There's such tremendous strides that have been made in terms of the ability of using technology to manage and track information, to keep updated on the status, towards develop or pursuing an educational plan. This initiative is again currently underway. What we're doing is we're building an education planning tool that will assist counselors and advisors, but also allow students to access their educational plan themselves to help manage their educational process. And so that's an efficiency tool that's going to really offer tremendous benefits to our students. So that one, 2.3, is underway, and we're looking forward to getting that in place by next fall. So those are that's an overview of the student success items. I'm available for questions.
So I wanted to talk about the students that are weak in their basic skills. Just maybe you could give me a little update. How are we dealing? I remember we were talking about the students that are 4 levels below college readiness. What are we doing for those students? How are they integrating into this system? And are we using technology to help them? I'm just not sure what's going on. That's why I'm asking.
You know, that's, as we've said since we started this, that all of these recommendations are important, but there are a few of them that really impact dramatically the outcomes, and this is one of the most significant. There are a variety of projects going on at individual colleges up and down the state, focused really in 2 or 3 areas: compression, acceleration, this assessment, again, trying to make certain we modularize it so students only take the remediation that they need as opposed to taking an entire remediation course. And then, again, with the assessment, some refresher activities so that students don't come to the college and take an assessment test without any kind of refresher whatsoever. They have at least a couple of hours. So those activities are going on at colleges up and down the state. And what we're beginning to see, as we expected, we shared, by the way, a compendium of all those best practices, and there must have been, I don't know, Pam, do you remember? There probably were 40 or 50 of them in that compendium. What we're beginning to see is colleges that have historically delivered those to 100 students or 150 students are now beginning to scale those up. That's been the real challenge, is how do you take a program you know works for 250 students and scale it up to 12,000 or 20,000? So we are beginning to see some of the colleges that are doing that, and the incremental costs are fairly insignificant, especially when you consider that those students are likely to succeed and re-enroll. Otherwise they would have dropped out. So this next year or 2 is going to be really critical, and what I think you'll see 3 years from now are probably 3 or 4 or 5 ways of doing this, and all of the colleges will have adopted one or more of those. So there is a lot of work going on in that regard. A lot of it's very robust, and a tremendous amount of it is very promising.
Okay, so I think that partially answers my second question is, when when students are doing their education plans, we expected that there would be a greater need for basic skills classes. So is this how they're adapting to that need?
Yes, I think we won't really be able to tell the full impact of the changes in the college's mix of courses offered until later this year, because the first full year of that was the past year, and you'll be able to see that. What I suspect you'll see is the percentage of basic skills courses in a given college's curriculum will begin to tick up as a result of that. So in other words, if they were historically offering 8% of all their offerings in remediation and basic skills, maybe it'll be 9, 9.5, 10, and we will be able to track that. We just can't track it yet because we haven't had a full cycle of funding yet.
And I really don't know the answer to this. Are we seeing students coming out of our K through 12 system a little better prepared?
Well,
recently,
that's difficult to say at a system-wide level. Anecdotally, when I talk to CEOs, I hear some of them say, you know, the work that our faculty are doing with high school faculty to better align, especially in English and math, is beginning to pay some dividends. So I think, I don't think there's any systematic way to say overall it's better or it's worse or it's about the same. I can only tell you that the number one recommendation on our list here, which was to do a better job of working with K-12, the faculty at the local level are beginning to work with faculty in the high schools, and we are seeing, as we've said in the past, if we can simply make sure that when they come out of high school, and the latter part of their English is focused on composition as opposed to literature, that lines up much better with what our faculty are looking for when students come in. So that's not something you can just edict. It's something that really has to happen at the regional level, at the grassroots level. I can only tell you that those conversations are underway.
Okay, just because we talk about these policies, I'm even just thinking, hearing Common Core in the news and all that, so I'm just kind of wondering how are we moving along? So the answer is we're moving along, but it's a slow process. So just to
it's
kind
slow,
of keep that
and
pace
measuring it is going to take some time.
Okay, thank you.
Chancellor Harris, I just had a question. We talk about student success, but what about educator success as far as I heard in the strategic plan, the challenge is if we can't educate the educators and give them time and the money allotted to make this a better success, because like I said, I was at the airport the other day, I just started talking with some people, and that was one of their concerns is we get 30 minutes in something we need 4 hours, and if there's no funding, there's no money, how can I impact my students? So they go, we just sort of do it, halfway, so, and it's in the strategic plan, but it's just something I'm becoming more aware of is the educators, to have a better success, to show a better scorecard, would be if we can educate the educators.
Yeah, if you look at employee development, generally speaking, and there's been a great deal of research that shows that Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies invest 3 to 5% of their resources in employee development. And it is somewhat ironic that those of us in higher education who are in the education business probably spend less than 0.5%. So, as I mentioned earlier, we've had a cutback at the state level of those funds, and so we really are dependent on the colleges as their resources are reestablished to make that a priority, and I think that they will, especially when they want these student success initiatives to be successful as much as we do. But in a minute, you're going to hear from Patrick, and you'll see in the details of the report, our colleges have lost 18% purchasing power over the lost COLA over the last 4 or 5 years. It's hard to say to them, you have to do professional development when they're worried about paying electric bills. So I think you're going to see this. It's just not going to be quick.
First of all, thank you very much, Executive Vice Chancellor Skinner Deputy Chancellor Skinner for the presentation. I just wanted to ask a couple things. You had mentioned that this is probably the most complex and intensive accountability system in higher education in the country, and I was just out of curiosity, what other states are doing anything approaching this? And secondly, and Chancellor Harris mentioned the issue of funding for things such as professional development. What do you see as the biggest challenges internally and externally to the implementation of these recommendations?
Patrick, you want to comment on the states?
So I'll assess the first part on the accountability, and we did an extensive environmental scan on what's going on out there. I would say that everybody in the nation, as far as doing 2-year public system accountability, does standard graduation rates and momentum points. Many of them will do it and show an equity view. I've not seen anybody that shows it in the way that we do it as far as level of preparation upon entry, to where we've actually broken it down by success by remedial, non-remedial, and where you start. I know of only maybe 2 or 3 other systems that are showing wage outcomes of students as a piece of their accountability system. They just don't have that capacity to do it or access to the data. So I think we're at a pretty high level as far as our accountability and our ability to actually use that data and hand it back to campuses so that it's actionable on their level too.
Just out of curiosity, are any other states doing individual education plans for students?
Yeah, quite a few other states do that. Quite a few other states have centralized student registration systems for their entire segment, okay? Which makes it a lot easier when you're all on one common system, which we are not. So they have an easier implementation haul on that.
Keep in mind, those are states that have 10 community colleges or 12, not 112 or 13. In terms of funding, I do think what's landmark about the last couple of years is that the administration and the legislature have actually invested not once but twice in this program. $50 million last year, $100 million more this year, plus $70 million in equity. If we can get them to invest 2 or 3 more times, I think you're going to see quantum change. But historically in California, we get Partnership for Excellence money, here today, gone tomorrow. Now, by the way, the expectations remain, but the money does not. So what we're focusing on is that that we say to the Department of Finance, the administration, and the legislature, we are going to do these things, but you simply have to carry through and fund them into the future.
Good timing on that. Member Buddy?
I'm wondering if it was intentional when these were created. and we talk about student success, that the issues of life that intersect with community colleges are nowhere to be found here. I keep coming back to the issue of housing, and I have one of the kids I work with has a dad starts drinking at 9 in the morning, and by 4 in the afternoon he's home and breaking things and beating people up, and he never can finish a semester. And he's passionate about school, but he lives in a war zone, and most of the kids I do that I work with live in a war zone. And I was blown away when I learned about this community college system and how and everything that it has to offer, but I could not figure out why, for the life of me, that there's not one community college in Los Angeles County that has a dorm or a safe place for folks to live and learn. And you talk about student success, but if someone doesn't feel safe and stable in their life, does any of this matter? And what responsibility does this system have to help them get to that place? And I think about housing and why there's not a dorm in LA County for students that live in awful environments and have to go to school every day and come back and study and face the peer pressure in those communities and dysfunctional families at times. I wonder about therapy. Is this, I mean, you talk about vets returning home with some of the issues they face. Are we ever going to get to a place where they're going to be incredibly successful if they're still dealing with the PTSD and the trauma? And that trauma goes to foster youth. That trauma goes to the formerly incarcerated that I work with. So if they don't get past that, are we wasting time and money with everything else? And then the other thing is employment. And we all know that if someone doesn't have parents that are giving them money, then most people want to work. They don't want to go to school. And so do we have any place for folks to find jobs? Can we create more jobs on campus? Can we hire 50 youth on a campus to be student navigators to bring the new kids in and show them the way and teach them how to study? Because I've had hundreds of kids apply for jobs on campuses and no one ever gets one, so there's obviously not enough. So I look at this and I just wonder why for the students we serve, why anything having to do with life and what the challenges that this population faces, why this isn't addressed in here at all, and is there another group working on that, or is it just not being discussed?
Let me back into that and talk about the jobs piece of that first. I do think there's a tremendous desire on the part of the colleges to try to enhance work-study funding so we can get more students on campus to work. Correspondingly, there's a great pressure on campuses for us to counsel students that they may be better off to rely more on financial aid and go full-time because their success ratchets up pretty tremendously if they can do that. Now, we don't want to burden them with student debt or put them in a position where they can't manage their finances. But generally, a lot of students don't realize financial aid that's available to them, and if they were to take that financial aid and go full-time, they could get done much quicker and get into the world of work, and it's financially a better equation for them. Mm-hmm. As it relates to the first part of your question, and I suspect none of us are going to like this answer, but the truth is the colleges struggle to afford to provide an education for the students that come to their door and to help the students be successful. We'd like to believe, because we're in the education business, that the state and the federal government are providing resources through other social programs to help with some of those other issues that you're talking about. Historically, there are half a dozen dorms at community colleges in this state, but that's about all. Historically, our campuses this system has never been designed to be a resident system. It is a commuter system with very few exceptions. And you're absolutely right, especially when you look at foster youth in this state. Many of them emancipate at 18. They literally are put out on the street. And so we do have some programs to try to help foster youth, but we simply are not set up, nor are we funded, to provide the kind of backstop for living arrangements and living costs and residence.
I'm not sure the funding argument, because I mean, if you're foster youth, you're coming with a certain funding stream. Mm-hmm. If you're veterans, you're coming with a certain stream of money. If you're formerly incarcerated, you're coming with that stream. If you're a foreign exchange student, you're coming with quite a bit of money. I feel like if you're serving those types of populations, they're all coming with different streams that could pay for this. So I don't think it's a financial issue at all. The question is this, I don't understand why a son of a doctor and teacher, I needed to live in a dorm at Emory University, 20 minutes away from my house. But these kids that live in awful environments and are desperately trying to escape them have no ability whatsoever. And I have to send kids to Sierra College in Sacramento so they can have a safe place to live.
You know, there may be a better long-term solution on this, but as the Chancellor was saying, our primary purpose is education and training. But I put it in the context of veterans, and I think this is really important for the system to work towards in the interim. And that is that there are resources out there. Often our counseling, our staff on the campuses are not really well versed in terms of what there is to be able to do to refer to students specifically for issues as you're laying out. With regard to the veteran centers, we have many counselors and director staff on veteran centers that have good resource knowledge, but most of them are education counselors. They're looking at trying to get people, our students, our clients, be better educated, to learn to write, to read, to get the degrees. But we also have to, because of the clientele that we have, to do the things that you're suggesting, and we have to be able to figure out a way in the interim, because we don't have a good long-term solution, I suppose, to that issue, the issues that you're bringing up. But in the interim, I think we do have to have the system be very well connected. Just like it is when we talk about CTE later on in this afternoon, we have to be connected to employers, to those that are really driving the economy in a way that we're responsive, and be able to feed them our students. But we do have to at least be able to have knowledge about what do you do when you have situations like the ones that you're pointing out.
Yeah, I think the training of counselors is huge, and maybe even bringing some community-based organizations on campus that have more social worker types that can actually work with the student population. This is probably a sidebar, not a discussion for right here, but if there's someone at the table that could educate me on what our position up here is as it relates to the different districts around the discussion of housing. I sat with the Chancellor of LA. I've sat with some of the board members of LA. They're all interested in this idea. They all want to do it. None of them know how to do it. So the question is, in San Diego as well, the question is, I don't even understand how this board would work with them around this issue, how we can help them, what kind of leverage we have. I don't understand. So if there's someone that could kind of brief me on that afterwards.
Yeah, we can talk about it in more detail. And there are some models where colleges have cooperated with private developers to underwrite the construction of low-cost housing adjacent to colleges. It's rare, although it's probably rare because we're in California and the financial equation for that is so difficult. But it's not unheard of, and I think if there are folks in LA or San Diego or other places that are interested in that, we certainly can provide some background information. And I don't think there's a high level opposition to doing that kind of work. It's just it's not unlike healthcare. There are a lot of folks who believe we ought to have fully staffed healthcare operations on each one of our campuses. And many of our colleges have opted to try to get students into healthcare activities in their communities rather than us get in the healthcare business. But I do believe there are options for student residences if there are districts that are interested in working.
I think it's a little more common for a university to have a dorm on a campus than a full hospital. So, go on.
I mean, we're actually in that same boat in Pasadena, and there's some public-private partnerships that are developing, primarily because we have a lot of international students also want to do that, but there seems to be a precedent. But I think Member Budnick raises a good point. 4 years ago, though, the issue when we took on this process was how do we open up access just to even get enrolled in classes anymore because we saw that promise slipping away. And so what we did was we made sure there's more spots in classes. So it's even the students that you're talking about weren't even having access to enroll in colleges as much as they had in previous years. So we did a system-wide effort to kind of reopen access, reform the system so that more students coming out of high school, despite the situation they were born into, could actually get a class. And now that access is slowly being restored, how do then we open it up so that students from all walks of life can overcome those obstacles and succeed? And I know Senator Steinberg, actually, when I went through the confirmation process, was asking these very same questions and showed some model systems about residential campus environments to address some of those very same issues.
I guess I'll close with this. At least within corrections, they say in a facility you can't rehabilitate anybody until they feel safe first and stable first. Once they feel safe and stable, then the educational programs and the treatment programs and everything else begin to work. And I wonder if that same research that's been done over and over within the correction system applies to the community. In that if someone in their life does not feel safe and they don't feel stable, if they're ever going to get through this process, through this student success process, like we want them to. And do we have an obligation to attempt to integrate those things about life and safety and stability into this plan or another plan? Or is it another group that forms and has another conversation? Because I'm very interested in having that conversation.
Thank you, Member Budnick.
Board Member
Take
Budnick?
a 10-minute break if there are no other questions right now. It's a 10-minute break.
The legislature ought to put money into housing instead of money into prison.
I'm going to probably try to stay for
That's my legislation.
maybe another